So if the grid goes out coast to coast and is out for an extended period, then tens of millions of people will die. And that's what we're trying to wake people up to.
We're experiencing inflation, food shortages, a war in Ukraine, and stock market meltdown. We couldn't ask for any more, right? But today we're joined by David Tice, who's a good friend of mine. I've talked to many times, and we'll get into the details. But David has just produced a documentary about the energy grid in the U.S. It's called Grid Down, and what would happen if we lost our electricity, mostly, right? And I'm assuming, since you live in Texas, that it was inspired by the ice storm that hit like 2 years ago, right?
No, it actually wasn't, Addison. So I've thought about this and started the documentary before the ice storm happened in Texas. And I've been thinking a lot bigger than that in terms of a national problem, just not a Texas problem.
So before we really get into the documentary and the big idea, I do want to kind of catch readers up. We've talked a couple times. One, we talked about Soul Surfer, but even before that, you were the founder of the Prudent Bear Fund, which I followed closely the whole time I was doing the Daily Reckoning. It was one of my daily reads. And then also the fund itself. Can you just give me kind of an overview of like what you, like your thought process when you moved from the fund to Soul Surfer, which was a successful movie, and now this documentary? Just kind of like walk me through your thought process as you did all of that.
So a lot of this kind of evolved. I never thought I would get involved in executive producing a feature film, which is what Soul Surfer was, and feel really excited about that because it was an A+ cinema score, influenced tens of millions of people's lives, I think, especially young girls. And that was never in my plan. This document,
just I don't want to stop you from the story, but just explain what Soul Surfer was, because you and I have talked about it, and there's probably a lot of people that have seen it, but it's an amazing story.
Well, thank you. So this was a story about Bethany Hamilton, who lost her arm to a shark attack in her early teens. And then she came back, and through faith and perseverance and her belief in God, she ended up becoming a champion surfer, even with one arm, and ended up winning, a championship. So, and our story of Soul Surfer just told that story and how she persevered and overcame adversity. And it started Dennis Quaid and Helen Hunt and Carrie Underwood and Anna Sophia Robb. And I think it was a pretty amazing story.
Yeah, it was very good. And when I watched it the first time, I didn't even know that you were involved. So I thought you did a great job.
Thank you.
But I remember meeting, I think we had dinner one night, and you were telling me all the process of making it. But that's part of what I'm interested in is your progression from running a fund or a group of funds to producing Soul Surfer, and then now this documentary.
Well, I do realize that film is a great mechanism by which people can be impacted, and millions of people. And certainly you did that, Addison, with a couple of your great documentaries that I'm in awe of as well still, that alerted a lot of people to the dangers of fiat money and out of control spending. And we're probably facing some of the consequences of that, today.
Aren't we?
Yeah. So anyway, film has a great way to reach people. And I actually started a charity at one point that unfortunately hasn't, thrived, trying to teach kids character through inspirational movies, such as Soul Surfer. And I actually had started that charity before I came upon Soul Surfer. And I thought, why not make this movie?
Mhm.
Now, for this documentary, again, it's trying to warn people. And frankly, I'm trying to help save the country. And because I feel like this is eminently fixable. And there's a lot of documentaries out there that are simply scare porn. And this one is one that I've tried to balance some positivity and some optimism in my portrayal of this problem. And I've tried to come up with a action plan whereby we can actually have a movement and we can create change.
So maybe the best place to start is to talk about what the problem is. It's an aging energy grid for the most part, but without any kind of political support to update it. And there's also a resistance to private enterprise involved in providing energy for the country.
So it's a very complicated problem. And as you said, the grid has been really developed slowly. And it's kind of baling wire and chewing gum and rubber bands that have kind of kept it together. And there has not
duct tape involved too, right?
Yes, duct tape for sure. So it's happened, and private industry is involved, obviously, through electric utility companies. Now, some of those are citizen-owned, but the vast majority of them are companies that are shareholder-owned or that are privately owned. But it's very complicated. There's the issue of if you put money into your utility infrastructure to be reimbursed, it's got to go through rate making in order to get that approved so that your bills will include, payment to the utility for that depreciation and return on capital on that investment.
What is the issue? Like, what is the impediment for ensuring that the grid continues to evolve? It has to evolve. It has to get better.
People are trying to improve it every day. There's great people that work for these utilities, but let's talk just about the protection of it. Okay. One of the big issues is that utilities would rather think about warming up your pizza oven most of the time than worried about, what North Korean's leader might do or the threat of China. And they kind of feel like that should be a problem addressed by Homeland Security or by the Defense Department. So there's a little bit of pointing different ways as far as not my problem. And putting money into this grid for something that doesn't actually create more capacity, but actually just protects it more is still subject to rate making. And sometimes rate making is difficult. Sometimes there are citizen groups trying to keep rates down. Then there's another issue. The utilities, it seems like, would just as soon, just leave well enough alone. And they're happy with where they are, and they don't want to be told by anybody what to do. And because sometimes it is a little fragile at times because it's been pieced together over the years. And therefore, they don't go out of their way to say, oh my gosh, I need to protect against a cyber attack or an electromagnetic pulse attack. And then the regulators, frankly, we believe have not stepped up and have not been rigorous enough in enacting requirements for the utilities to better protect the civilian infrastructure.
Well, why is that? Is that like a cross incentives that aren't aligned?
Well, let's talk a little bit about the regulations. So
Yeah, regulation is a big part, I'm sure.
yeah. So FERC, which is the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, actually has underneath them NERC, which is the North American Electric Reliability Council. And so NERC is actually the body that provides regulations for these electric utilities. Now, the problem is NERC has 12 trustees. 9 of those trustees are essentially coming directly from the utility industry. And there's been a pattern, and we've experienced this, and there's a number of patriots that have been fighting for grid security going back 20 years. So I call these, ladies and gentlemen, grid warriors. And they have experienced a great deal of recalcitrance from utilities making progress in this area and recalcitrance from regulators doing much about it over 15 to 20 years. So that's one of the things that we're trying to address with this film. And we're trying to wake Americans up such that we can say, we're not going to take this anymore. There needs to be better regulation. And we have a line in the film where we say, because of this inept regulation, in a lot of areas, it's somewhat been the fox guard and the hen house.
Going back to like when JP Morgan built the power station at Niagara Falls, like the way that the grid has been put together has been projects like that. And then they've been connected in like haphazard ways, right? So if you're talking about getting better regulation or better communication between the different utilities, how does that happen? Because it's a lot of different entities trying to sell power at the same time.
It's extraordinarily complex. And that's one of the reasons that they don't want to be told what to do, to add in some zero blockers or some Faraday cages or some relay, devices that better manage current, because they feel like it's operating well right now. And it is extremely complicated. And there are, engineers with decades of experience and, many years of advanced schooling that have figured this out. But, and I can't say I'm an expert in that.
So you chose the title Grid Down for the documentary.
Let me say the full title is actually Grid Down, Power Up. And I can't let you forget the second half of that. Because power up, we want to choose power up and not grid down. And frankly, this is kind of a double entendre in that power to the people, the people are going to take the power and, make sure that we retain our power.
What happens if the grid goes down? Does it go down all at once, or does it just go down in parts? I remember there was a big storm in the Northeast. We weren't actually living here at the time. We were in France, but it knocked out power in like 4 states. Like, what happens when the grid goes down?
Well, in our film, we talk, Addison, about the difference between a grid interruption and a grid being down for a long period of time. And frankly, we're made a little bit complacent by the grid being interrupted for a few days, because it definitely can cause deaths. It can cause people to go hungry for a while, and it can cause, people to miss their, carpools, et cetera. But what if the grid goes down and out for more than a month, then we have a serious loss of lives. And therefore, in Texas, as bad as that was, we lost about 260 lives, and it was about 50 billion of consequence to the economy. But what we're talking about in this film is truly an Armageddon-like scenario. And we get just a little taste of it by seeing that Northeastern blackout in 2003 or by Texas. But we're talking about something that is like 1,000-fold. So if the grid goes out coast to coast and is out for an extended period, tens of millions of people will die. And that's what we're trying to wake people up to. There again, that sounds like fear porn, but it's true. And we need to wake people up to the fact that that's what we might be dealing with, and that is solvable. Now, what's happened in Texas and the Northeast is a little bit of a precursor that comes from poor regulation and poor maintenance and those types of things. It's kind of like if you get on an airplane and your tray table's not clean, you wonder about how well they're doing on the engine maintenance.
So two of the causes of the grid going down that you bring up, one would be cyber attack, and then another is a EMT event. And how realistic are either one of those events? In the movie, you're trying to wake people up to that, but what are instead of calling it fear porn, like what are the actual things that people should be concerned with? And I'm going to follow that question up with what can people actually do? So
actually, I'm going to go back just a step and say that, as you mentioned, those are two of the attacks that we are warning about: cyber attack and then electromagnetic pulse, or EMP. The third attack that is potentially puts it at risk is a physical attack, just knocking out substations, transformers, nuclear power stations, et cetera. The fourth attack is a geomagnetic disturbance, or a GMD, which is essentially a solar flare that is actually referred to as a natural EMP, because an electromagnetic pulse attack is very similar to what a solar storm would provide, but that's simply the natural way of doing it. A EMP is coming from a nuclear blast in the atmosphere. Now, 3 of those attacks come from adversaries. One of them comes from Mother Nature. Now, so we have 4 nation states that we feel like, have openly talked about the potential for cyber attack or electromagnetic pulse attack. And those are China, Russia, North Korea, and Iran. Now, it's also possible for terrorist groups to potentially do a physical attack or a cyber attack that could essentially bring down the grid.
What, as you're doing the research and putting the film together, what are the likelihood of any of those things happening? I know we have adversaries, but we also don't want to aggravate them. Like I find it hard to believe that they would do harm on such magnitude. How do you even think about that?
Okay, so let's talk about that. We've certainly had some recent experience with Ukraine, and we've had, Vladimir Putin has shown to be, fairly cutthroat. And in the past, we used to think about wars being fought with tanks and artillery on foreign battlefields in Europe or Asia. There is the potential for civilian engagement, and dependent upon how cutthroat, the adversary is. And we've certainly seen some of that with Putin's experience in the Ukraine lately, where they have gone after civilian and they've killed, I'd say thousands, if not tens of thousands of Ukrainian citizens. So as far as the probability, Addison, no one knows, for sure what our adversaries might do. But to give you a couple of data points, we know from Russian defectors and Chinese defectors that electromagnetic pulse and bringing down the power grid is in the war plans of our major adversaries. North Korea has actually even mentioned that before. I believe Iran, potentially has mentioned that before. There was a general that actually uttered an admission during a peace talk it was either Trent Franks or Roscoe Bartlett, that's when they were talking about nuclear disarmament. They said, well, we would probably just use an electromagnetic pulse attack and knock out your power grid. So our adversaries have some very cutthroat tendencies at times, and hopefully this never happens. But as Ronald Reagan said, the best peace through strength, I believe, is that strength is the best way to deter adversaries and not having this vulnerability.
How do we strengthen the grid to prevent things like an EMP or some kind of act of God?
There are engineering solutions that have been around for a long time. And so our military has been concerned about electromagnetic pulse attack for decades. And they have actually spent significant money hardening, command control centers and our missile silos and our aircraft, our Air Force bases, et cetera, through zero ground blockers is one mechanism, relay stations, something called Faraday cages. There are a number of, there's actually a device out called Cyberattacks, which is a joint venture between CPS Energy and Siemens that is available now that could help protect against cyber attack as well as electromagnetic pulse attack, and can prevent this surge of electricity, going to a massive level and essentially blowing out transformers. And the problem is if these transformers go out and are permanently damaged and you have to buy another one, it's not like you can go to Walmart and pick up one of them. They're made in South Korea and Germany, and there's a long wait list for them. And if a number of them went out at the same time, you're not going to be able to get a new transformer.
What's the message of the film in the sense of what can individuals actually do about it? Because the grid is what it is, and the people that work for, in Baltimore, we have BG&E, and they come by and they replace transformers and stuff like that. But I'm not going to do that.
Okay, so
I do that.
So here's what your viewers can do, and we're going to make this very, very easy. They can go to griddownpowerup.com, and that's one reason I want you to continue to remember the second half of the movie, because it's in the website. So griddownpowerup.com, and you will be able to see the trailer, and then you will eventually be able to see the movie from our website. We're going to do self-distribution, and we're going to utilize a pay it forward approach to pay for the film, whereby early on, you're being given the opportunity to see the film for free through the generosity of someone who has come before you. But if you would like for the film to continue in its distribution, we'd ask for you to pay it forward and swipe your credit card for a small amount to get other people to be able to watch it. The other things that we're providing at the website is it's providing a genesis for a movement. And we are actually creating a national energy security council to be able to provide the infrastructure by which we individuals can collaborate with legislators, with regulators, with other citizen warriors to be able to help make sure that better legislation is passed. We do need better legislation, but we need better follow through. We need people on the butts of some of these regulators, and we need them on the butts of some of these utilities, and also after some of our legislators, making sure that they stay on top of Department of Energy and Department of Homeland Security and NERC and FERC, and make sure that we pay more attention to this.
At the beginning of our conversation, you said that you were interested in the topic prior to the ice storm in Texas. What initiated your initial concern?
Well, I've been a geopolitical student for a long time, and I've read, a lot of Agora publications going back 20 years. And I know Bill Bonner, has been concerned about China in the past and remains so. I haven't talked to Bill lately. And so I've been a little bit of a defense hawk in terms of being concerned. I've seen just more and more rhetoric coming from China and Russia at times. And I felt like, I have a big library of defectors' discussions about what their plans might be. And then so I actually came across a film that had been started, from a filmmaker out of California. And so through the benefit of knowing about that, I picked up that film and took it over, and she did some great work on it in the beginning, and she still remains as the executive producer. Her name's Patria Patrick. And so that's kind of how the film got started.
And so Luke, just remind me what people can do. They can go to the website, Grid Down Power Up.
Yes, griddownpowerup.com. We actually have a legislator outreach available right now. And let me describe that. That's up in the top part. There's a participate, and you can outreach to legislators. And so you put in your home address, and we have this very nifty, third-party software that will find your two specific state legislators, your upper house and your lower house, your U.S. Congressperson, your two U.S. senators, and your governor. And then we have put together a comprehensive letter that was inspired by our strategic advisory board, which is comprised of a number of top scientists and other grid warriors that have worked on this for a while. And you just hit a couple keys, and then those letters are off to those legislators. Additionally, you can go to another part of that, third-party website, and you'll see all the phone numbers there. And you can actually make phone calls and get to their voicemail. And we've heard that phone calls are a lot more considered by legislators than emails. You can sign a petition. You can, we've set it up where you can easily provide tweets and copy paste into your email program and spread the word. And so that's what we are about. We need to pound on these legislators. We also have another outreach that's not quite on the website yet. It will be very soon, which is a reach out to your NERC and FERC regulators, telling them that they need to step up and we need stricter standards. We also have an outreach to your state's major utilities board of directors, so they can hear from you saying that we are concerned after hearing about this vulnerability. And you might not have seen the film yet, but after you've seen the film, even after you've seen the trailer, you should be concerned enough that you can fire off emails to these individuals.
You sound very organized. I kind of wish I did something similar when we put out I.O.U.S.A, because we we did the film, we did the movie tour, to released it to all these cinemas all at the same time. I went on a speaking tour, but I never created any kind of foundation to like support the ideas. And I, like you said before, I think the things that we were talking about in 2008 are coming home to roost right now. So
in fact,
congratulations, I guess.
well, thank you. In fact, we have another website. It's called the U.S. Energy Security Council.com. And that's going to be a more extensive website whereby we can really collaborate. And we have a great deal of material talking about proposed legislation and proposed executive orders. There's also a belief by a lot of these grid warriors that action should be taken at the local level. And we talk in the film about how both San Antonio and then Rock Hill, South Carolina, have actually instituted grid protection initiatives at a local level. And so getting your city council and your mayors involved, this is a massive problem. And it's not just the grid. People ought to start thinking about their municipal water systems, et cetera, because if the water goes out, individuals will die within 3 days.
I want to go back to your time at the Prudent Bear. If I might, like you were running money basically.
Right.
But you've changed your life dramatically since then. Do you have any thoughts about the success of the Prudent Bear for one, but also like moving on, like changing your life since then?
Well, I'm actually peripherally involved in a couple of money management operations. I'm the co-manager of a gold equity hedge fund that my partner runs day to day, that's generated a great track record. And we think gold and silver mining equities are going to do very well in this kind of period of fiat money ending badly. And so but I'm not watching all the employment reports, nearly as closely as I used to, et cetera. I saw this film and I felt like this was an opportunity to convey this message to individuals and families, just because I sense the complacence of when you go to your light switch and you turn it on and you pick up the phone and you call Uber Eats and just we have such a phenomenal life, but then it's so dependent upon electricity. And then here I became frustrated when you just think about the fact that our Defense Department spends billions, tens of billions on this, and they haven't really thought about civilian infrastructure. But even our Air Force bases are dependent upon the civilian grid. And so I have a snippet in our movie where a vice chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, John Hyten, made a comment saying that the military has protected our grid and our civilian infrastructure is not. And we should probably do something about that.
Right. Well, one thing is people can go and watch the film. Did you say it was going to be available on the website?
Yes, you'll be able to go directly to griddownpowerup.com and be able to watch it, stream it.
Do you have a time frame for that?
Yes, it should be available August 1st at the latest, possibly even a couple of weeks before. We are, I know there's a lot of passionate Daily Reckoning fans that are libertarians, and they know Mark Skousen and Joanne Skousen from Freedom Fest. Yes. We're actually premiering the film July 15th at 9 o'clock in the morning at Freedom Fest.
Is that the one? Are they still in South Dakota?
Nope, they're back at Vegas now.
Oh, they are. Yeah, I had talked to Mark on the Wiggin Sessions, and he was very adamant about moving to South Dakota. But I guess a lot of attendees aren't.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's cool. Yeah, I did a screening of one of my films. They run, it's the Anthem Film Fest, right?
Oh, exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, cool.
If I could say just a couple more words about the movie, it has Dennis Quaid narrating, and Dennis Quaid is a believer in the film. We have a snippet from George Carlin in the movie. We have segments from 60 Minutes recent story where they talked about the potential for a physical attack, where 9 substations could be knocked out through a physical attack and essentially bring down the grid coast to coast. So it's not just a cyber attack or a electromagnetic pulse attack that could bring, the whole nation's grid down. And then the other part to remember is that I've tried to end the film with some positivity, saying that we can do this, we can create a movement, and this is eminently fixable. And we Americans are not going to take no for an answer, and we can get this done. And so let's make it happen. We're going to choose power up, not grid down.
All right, let's make it happen.
Right. Thanks, Addison, for your time. Appreciate all you've done over the years.
Yeah. Thank you, David. It's always fun to talk to you.
Great.
All right.